Today, we are going to set the stage for World War I. And let's take a moment to look back on our last unit, the unit that saw countries in Europe becoming stronger in their sense of nationhood, the nationalization of Europe. We also saw that some nations became stronger and more fortified by merging groups of people with like culture, interest, religion, and languages. And then some nations were formed when old empires fell apart, specifically the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. And that could set the stage for some future conflict. So, we're now coming into the early part of the 1900s. Europe had enjoyed a century of relative peace, yet, remember the foreboding words of Otto von Bismarck. It looms over the continent. I shall not live to see a great war, but you will see it, and it will start in the East. From the last unit, can you recall what forces might contribute to conflict leading to war? Why might von Bismarck believe that the inciting incident will occur in the East? Let's look at the pursuit of peace and its false promise. By the early 1900s, many efforts were underway to end war and foster understanding between nations. A few examples. In 1896, the first modern Olympic Games were held. Their founders hoped the Games would promote love of peace and respect for life. Also around this time, in 1899, world leaders attended the First Universal Peace Conference. There they set up the Hague Tribunal, a world court to settle disputes between nations. So that would seem like a promising move, wouldn't it? In addition, Alfred Nobel set up the annual Nobel Peace Prize to reward people who worked for peace. And then women's suffrage organizations supported pacifism, which is the opposition to all war. So all of these were pretty good indicators of peace-loving initiatives. Still, the seeds of war were planted. Let's look at nationalism and international rivalries. First, we had aggressive nationalism, and it was one of the leading causes of international tensions. Nationalist feelings were strong in both Germany and France. There were also imperial rivalries, which divided European nations. In 1906 and again in 1911, competition for colonies brought France and Germany to the brink of war. And the 1800s saw a rise of militarism, the glorification of the military. The great powers expanded their armies and navies, creating an arms race that further increased suspicions and made war more likely. So it's ironic that the rise of militarism, on one hand, allegedly or ostensibly might make a country stronger, but it also invites a vulnerability because it sparks the potential for conflict as well. Let's look at aggressive nationalism. Many people were promoting peace, but the seeds of nationalism were growing into an aggressive force which would inevitably shape the course of history. France and Germany were both strong new empires with passionate and nationalistic feelings about their countries. One area of contention between these two growing powers was over the territory of Alsace-Lorraine, a border province which the French had lost to the Germans in the Franco-Prussian War of 1871. Nationalism was also strong in Eastern Europe. Russia was promoting pan-Slavism, the idea that all Slavic people shared a common nationality. Russia, the largest Slavic country, felt it had a duty to lead and defend all other Slavic countries. This positioned Russia as a supporter of the Balkan region of Serbia, and this foreshadows the Balkan powder keg, as you will see soon. In 1912, several Balkan states attacked the Ottoman Empire, Turkey. Several Balkan states fought among themselves in the years until 1914. And this is when the region saw the event that led to the First World War. So let's look at the map. You'll see the Balkan countries after the war in 1912, and they're quite large. And then you see the Balkan countries today, and they're broken up into much smaller components or regions. So you have to ask yourself, what were the forces that caused that? Now, the Treaty of Bucharest in 1913, you'll see that certain lands were ceded to Serbia, ceded to Greece, and ceded to Bulgaria, and international boundaries were redrawn. That can cause conflict. Seeds of war. Let's look at the causes and effects of tangled European alliances. Distrust led the great powers to sign treaties pledging to defend one another. These alliances were intended to create powerful combinations that no one would dare attack. The growth of rival alliance systems, however, increased international tension, and militarism led nations to make political and military alliances. So if one country aligned with another before a war even happens, what they're essentially saying is, if anything happens, if you get into any conflict, we'll back you up. So it's a preemptive alliance. All right. The problem is you're already bestowing your alliance without knowing what that future conflict may be, if it's warranted or not, and how far deep you might get into it. So look at European pre-war alliances. It's 1914. The war hadn't hit yet. You see the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary. You see allies, there's France, Great Britain, Russia. Yellow indicates neutral nations, so Norway and Spain, for example, even Albania. Serbia went with the allies. Some of the lighter green countries, such as Italy and Romania, they were neutral and later joined the allies, but they weren't quite yet allies. And then the lighter pink were neutral nations that later joined the Central Powers, so Constantinople, Bulgaria, Constantinople's in Turkey, present-day Turkey, aligned with Central Powers. So, alliances based on history and common nationalism formed into two camps. The Triple Entente, or the allies of Britain, Russia, and France, and then later Italy and the U.S. would become part of that, but the U.S. came later, versus the Central Powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary. Later, the Ottoman Empire would become part of this alliance, and while the intent was not to go to war, the stage was set to take sides in the onset of a controversial event. And that event would come. It was as if all the logs and tinder were being set up for a giant bonfire, but no matches were lit yet. Let's look at the standing armies in Europe in 1914. So you see that at this time, Britain had the least amount of soldiers. They do have an advantage, and I'm going to leave it to you to guess what it is. Alright? Because they have a distinct advantage. Russia has the most soldiers, followed by Germany and then France. Okay, conclusion. Quick tip. One helpful way to remember the factors that led to World War I is the acronym MAIN. Okay, please sear this into your brain. So MAIN: militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism. MAIN forms the causes of World War I. By 1914, the entire stage was set for World War to break out in Europe. All that was needed was a motive. Now, imperialism and militarism contributed to the growing tensions in Europe as each nation sought domination over the other. So you had economic rivalries for supreme industrial power among Britain, Germany, and France. You had the competition for colonies in Asia and Africa, especially after the Berlin Conference imperialism. You had the race to build bigger armies and navies in response to social Darwinism, a quest to prove that you're a top dog in the survival of the fittest. And then you had these glorified ideas of war and military leadership, militarism. A series of alliances meant to prevent war would eventually lead to war between the great powers of Europe, the Triple Entente and the Central Powers. And as I said before, these alliances were created before war even happened. So when war was sparked, you already had too many people involved, too many people who pledged allegiance. And it made it into something bigger than perhaps it needed to be. And that's about it. I want you to think of these questions. What effort did Alfred Nobel make toward peace? And what power had the largest standing army in 1914? And that's about it.